Welcome to the business edition of PM Express, and today we are very fortunate to have the Acting Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Mr. Mishadai Wusomua, talking about revenue mobilization and dealing with that challenge. Haven't we read those IMF reports, the World Bank reports, and those other think tanks talking about revenue being our biggest challenge? But why is it a big challenge at all for the country in terms of going out there to raise the required revenue for the country? What is the challenge out there? Why are they struggling? They always meet their targets, but the IMF tells us that when it comes to revenue GDP, that is very, very low. Well, today on the business edition on PMX, you're looking at dealing with the revenue mobilization challenge and talking to the man who is at the center of raising the required revenue to drive the development agenda of this country. Mr. Mishadai Musawa is the Acting Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority. And I thank you so much for your time. And as we return back from the break, we'll be getting into the details, understanding this man moving from the financial world to public sector. How has it been as well? This is the business edition of PM Express. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back from the break, and as I said earlier, we are fortunate to have the Commissioner General, the Acting Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Mr. Mishadai Wusomua. Mr. Mishadai, thank you so much for granting us audience in your office.
Welcome.
And one would want to find, I knew you as a banker all over the continent, EcoBank, moved to several banks here, Tanzania. The next thing we heard was you being asked to come and join us or come to the public service. How has it been for you, working in the private sector where things are very easy, move around? Public sector, the culture and everything is different.
I think it's a good experience for me. Ironically, actually, I started my career in the public sector in the Ghana Statistical Service, and I did about 3 years there before I left for the banking sector. And therefore, for me, it's like where I started from, and then I have come back to my roots. So I have a little bit of public sector experience. And I think that a lot have changed the many, many years ago when I worked in the public sector from what I have come to meet today. One, there is a little, you can see a more of a performance management culture in the public sector, even though there is a lot more we can do. You can see a lot of aggressiveness, you can see a lot of qualified people in the public sector today. And so a lot have changed, and I think that we can only develop further from what we have done. Another thing I want to say about between the public and private sector is that today there's a lot of drive in the private sector that we need to also transform the same sort of drive and energy into the public sector. It is interesting for me, and I like
some will say that there might be early days yet, but would you describe your experience so far as interesting or challenging, or maybe the best is yet to come, or the challenging times are yet to come?
I think it's a combination of all the ones you have mentioned. It is challenging, it is interesting, and I think that we've done some quick things and quick wins in the short term. But I will also say that the best is yet to come. Yes.
And anything that you wish that it could have been reviewed to help you, or it's still early days here, because you talked about being there before you left. Things are very smooth, some would say, from what we see from the outside in the banking sector. And now that you've come into the public space, you think that there are things that we need to tweak a little bit to use the same level of measurement and all those things?
Yeah, fortunately for me, my background has been a mixture of a lot. In the private sector, I worked with some banks that were relatively, let's say, Ghanaian-owned. I worked with banks that were multinational in terms of Africa-owned. I worked with banks that were multinational in terms of across the globe. And therefore, for each of these banks, there were very different features and characteristics that you will see. And therefore, I see a mixture of all these as I work in this organization. In terms of, for example, if you talk about maybe a local bank, in terms of the kind of influence interaction that you have with people in various areas that have some sort of relationship with the bank. And if you come to a bank like, say, a multinational global bank, there will be levels of authority that you still require. Then there are some to which you have a lot of independence in terms of decision making and quick decision making. And then even when it comes to governance, for example, board membership and board method of operating, you find out that a local bank board is slightly different from an Africa bank board, and it's slightly different from a global bank. So there are all these differences do come. And I think that they all will actually is helping me at each level in managing GNR. For example, I worked in Standard Chartered Bank many years ago where I had to deal with unions. But I didn't find that in some other banks. So coming back here and finding unions is for me not anything new because I have dealt with unionized workers before.
And again, talking about your stint outside the country in African countries and all the rest, and sometimes we tend to describe Ghana as the rising star of Africa and all the rest. And are there things that haven't had that experience outside, you pat yourself on the back that Ghana has come far, even with respect to revenue mobilization and all the rest, compared to other African countries? You can just mention a few countries that have gone very far in terms of improving this space, but still some have a long way to go.
I have had a chance in the short time that I've been with the Ghana Revenue Authority to interact with a number of revenue authority organizations across Africa and even beyond. I will say that each of the countries compared to us have different advantages or different levels that we have reached. For example, one of the things I can say about Ghana compared to some of the other countries is in terms of the level of the laws, in terms of the Revenue Act and the other revenue authority laws that we have in Ghana. There are certain countries that the prosecution law, for example, for the Revenue Authority are not currently operational, and therefore they find us being more advanced as far as our legal framework for the tax administration is concerned. And so we are far advanced in that area. Some of the areas that I would say we are not that advanced is in terms of the technology. I have seen some tax authority that nobody will ever walks into a tax authority to pay tax. You don't even walk there to go and find out how much you have to pay. You can go to any bank at all. And again, you can also do your payment by various electronic means. But that is not the case in Ghana today, where we still have taxpayers still queuing to come and pay and things like that. And so you see that major difference. Another area that you can talk about is, for example, if you talk about VAT, that is the value-added tax. We still do the manual value-added tax forms that we fill in OP and put in the carbons and fill in. Again, you find countries like Rwanda, Kenya, and others where these are not currently being done. So definitely there are various differences. Some we have are far advanced. In other places, other cases, other countries are far advanced. So for me, it is the migration of best practices. If I think that there's something good in South Africa in terms of the SAS is the South Africa Revenue Authority, we can migrate from South Africa to Ghana. I've interacted with Rwanda Revenue Authority. There are certain things I've seen there we can migrate to Ghana. I've interacted with the Liberian Revenue Authority. Actually, they've even visited us, and there are certain things they have seen here, and they want to migrate to Liberia. So basically, that is the way I want us to pray, so that the best will come here.
Let's come to one thing that many people will be using that to measure your success or your progress. It has to do with the revenue targets and others. And every year, I stand to be corrected. You have a situation where the Ghana Revenue has met their target, the Ghana Revenue has met their target. But if you read those literature from the IMF, from the World Bank, they still complain that when you look at our tax GDP ratio, that is very, very low. Why are we not getting around this challenge in terms of mobilizing the required revenue to match our developmental needs and also expenditure as a country?
Yeah, if you look at the African country as a whole, the tax GDP ratio, the average is around 15%, and with some going as high as to 26%. If you go beyond Africa, there are certain countries that even go up to above 30%. Today in Ghana, we are around 12.5%, that's 12.5%. Definitely, there is room for us to be able to improve further and to be able to move away from the 12.5%. Our target or our strategy and our objective currently is to be able to move to 15, 17, and eventually to 20%. And we have given ourselves a 3-year window to get to at least 17%, and then from there we'll grow further. Now, there are a lot of things that we could do that will ensure that we'll be able to move from this 12.5%. And I think that in order to not to take the wind out of the sail, maybe I'm sure as we progress in this discussion, we will be able to talk about some of the initiatives and some of the things that can make us move from the 12.5% of the GDP and be able to get to the...
Because interesting, that was the next question that I was coming to. That so there's a 3-year target or a projection that you're making. What are some of the practical things that the Ghana Revenue is doing to ensure that we mobilize the required revenue for the country?
I think that it became like a cliche when we normally talk about widening and then deepening.
I heard that since I was in primary school, widening the taxing, and the next is becoming bigger or smaller. One doesn't even know.
Yes, that's what I said. So that it's become like a cliche. So it becomes like repeating the same thing. But there are a lot of things that you can do to, or we have already put together to ensure that we can do to widen as well as to deepen the tax net. Even though it is true that today, if you talk about the number of taxpayers, those who are registered for TIN, as at last year, we had 2 million people out of the, if you take the population of 30 million and if you cut out those who are not up to the tax paying age and you're looking at the population, you will expect that at least some 10 million people will have been registered for tax. As at last year, we had 2 million. Our target this I'm not talking about last year, I'm talking about 2019. As at 2018, we had 2 million. In 2019, we moved from 2 million to 3.374. So it means that we added 1.374 million more people to the 2 million that had registered in terms of having a TIN. Again, you also know that the fact that one has a TIN does not necessarily mean that he pays tax. But there is one element that is paying the tax first with actually being enrolled. And so that is one element that we want to start with. And therefore, our aim is to be able to increase the number of people that are registered for tax. There are a number of action points that we have on that front. And that is the use of third-party organizations and also using the law that has been passed on the TIN to be able to get more people registered. For example, we have the vehicle licensing office that, and then today what we are going to do is that we ensure that before you can get your vehicle registered, you must have a TIN. Now we have started with the banks. Before you have a bank account, you must have a TIN. It's going to continue into many, many areas. So before you can have your car registered, you must have a TIN. Before you can get your business registered, you must have a TIN. Before you can get go to Registrar General's department and register any business. So gradually, TIN becomes part and parcel of everyone's activity. And therefore, once we get the data like that, you are able to do what we call data matching and artificial intelligence. And that's going to, in fact, we are going to use a lot of data to be able to get more people into the tax net. When I say there are a lot of data, what do I mean? Let's say, for example, George, we go to vehicle registration, and George owns, let's say, an E-Class Mercedes Benz. And then when we come to match your data from the vehicle registration into our tax system, and George pays, let's say, 500 cedis a month as tax. So the question I have to ask, how can the guy own an E-Class that will cost him like 500,000 Ghana cedis and still pay a tax of. So then it becomes a way of beginning to interrogate. And these are methods that are being used all over the world to be able to identify opportunity. So through our own data, that is the domestic tax data, through the customs data, which is our own GRA customs data, through third-party data. When I say third-party data, government data like control and gender, SNITs, vehicle registration, and all other types of third-party data. Then we have another private sector third-party data. For example, if you go to, and some of them we have already started using, the mining sector. Today we are able to get data, and then we do a comparison. When we do the comparison and we find out that, for example, you sold an equipment or you do a service for the mining sector, and we find out that you got an invoice paid, automatically we do the same matching into our data. If you find out that you didn't pay any tax on that particular transaction, then we have to now look at the transaction. And it goes beyond the transaction. Because supposing we found out that you have not paid withholding tax on the equipment that you supplied, and we come and collect the withholding tax, the next level we have to match the data is to find out, okay, so if he was able to sell one equipment and pay the withholding tax of this, then what is his corporate income tax, which is a CIT? Then we have to now to look at it. After we have looked at CIT, then it becomes, oh, so how many employees has he got? So then we move on to your PA, YE. By the time we finish the PA, YE, we have to look at what other things that he do. So we have to go to your VAT and things like that. So there's a lot that we are going to do with data matching.
But some would say, what if that car was a gift to me from a family, a friend, or a benevolent, so I could have a Touareg or a Porsche Cayenne, and it might not be from my income earning?
Okay, that's interesting. You know that we have gift tax as well.
Yeah.
So if we are not going to find that you need to pay income tax or whatever tax, you may find out that we have to pay gift tax. But again, when I talk about this data, it doesn't necessarily mean that once we find something, it means that you have done something wrong. No. It means that it gives you the opportunity as a tax organization to start interrogating. Do you understand me? So it doesn't mean that if I find out that you are registered...
Having a Lamborghini, it means that I am earning a higher income than what I've declared to you.
But it gives us a basis for inquiry. Do you get me?
Yeah.
So you can inquire and find out that there's nothing to talk about or nothing to claim. So then there's no problem. So the important thing is that it's just like the way we all today go to Google or you go to Facebook, and once you download 10 gospel songs from YouTube, the next time you log into YouTube, they're already putting across for you some other gospel songs that are available. How did they know that you are a gospel song lover? It's because they are just using the artificial intelligence. And that's the same thing that we have to do. It might come that maybe that time you were looking for some gospel song for your program, and therefore you are not a gospel song. Next time they will realize that, oh, actually this is not a gospel song lover. It's rather a reggae. So basically, it's a matter of getting the data and making use of the data.
I see that the authority is trying to be quite heavy on technology in trying to improve revenue mobilization. But one would also want to ask that, how are you simplifying the process, that taking the human element away to ensure that even in the comfort of my home, now with mobile money, the Vice President has spoken about more of digitization, more of going cashless and all the rest. How are you deploying all these elements to let me pay my tax? Because there are instances where people have complained that they won't even pay the property rates to the local assemblies and they are struggling. How are you trying to deploy all these systems so that the committed persons out there would actually honor their tax obligations?
Okay, let me say that technology is one, but there are three things that we are looking at: technology, people, and service. So technology is only one aspect. Our people, the resource that we have here, and who will go out there to do the assessment, to raise the audits, is another area that we will focus on, because I'm sure very soon you come to that and you talk about how the people being the right people or doing the right things, or in terms of integrity and things like that. So people is what I mean. And then service. So these are only the three, and then for each of these ones, we have a drill down or a drop down of various action points under each of these three categories I have talked about. If you talk about the service, we are confident, we are conscious of the fact that people struggle in terms of paying the taxes. And therefore, our aim is to ensure that we make the taxpayer experience a different experience. Today, people come to queue and to pay taxes. Our aim, as I said in the beginning, is to ensure that you can pay, do e-payment. Sometimes I found that we write letters to a taxpayer whom I prefer to call our customers and say, you have a liability so and so and so. Can you issue a check? Then I ask, why do you say, can you issue a check? Just let him pay. Because if you are telling you issue a check, then you are trying to prescribe the method of payment. And we should rather encourage them to do. So we have the transfer, we have the SWIFT, we have the Momo, we have the also. So all the, and I know the government is, the Vice President is talking about the
digitization, going cashless.
Yes. So it's the same sort of path that we are.
Are there any clear
following.
targets in GR's case that by the end of this year, from next year, in terms of gradually moving towards a cash light in terms of payment of taxes, we should be getting there?
Yes. Our target is that by the end of this year, we'll have no tellers in GRA. You have to pay to the bank. And as I speak now, we already starting, where there's a teller, it will be a bank teller, not a GRA teller. But eventually, before the end of the year, we will not have a teller, so you have to pay through the bank. That is only the first step. I also challenge that already the eGov is also another government initiative, and we are part of the initial government organization that we couldn't be part of the pilot. And so we will be part of that initiative where it will allow every taxpayer to be able to pay electronically. In addition, we have also set up what we call the ITAPS. The ITAPS is also our own initiative, which is an electronic platform that allows you to file your tax. It will allow you to pay your tax. It will allow you to file your returns and do your vehicle income tax payment also online. And as I speak, some taxpayers already started using it to file their taxes, and it's called ITAPS. And so we will be doing the other aspects this year. So there's a lot that will happen this year. In
your submission, you made a quite critical point there about doing away with these tellers. And some would say, as we bring in the tech experience, how do we also manage the human experience to ensure that they become more of a redeployment of people rather than tech always has this enemy of what we do with the human factor in all this reformation that is going on?
Thank you very much. Unfortunately for me, I've gone through the mail as far as restructuring and changes are concerned. And I think that one of the key things that I will pride myself is the change management. And I think that any of such things that we want to do, we have got to address all the stakeholders. We have to look at who are the staff, how many are they, what can they do, how do we retrain them, what areas can you put them? And all these are things that we are mapping up. So there will not be any challenges as far as we will look at.
Doing away with the people maybe and bringing in more tech to?
We would definitely train them and make sure that they are the right places. In terms of doing away, you know that when it comes to staff, there are so many options that you can look at. And then also sometimes you also have the opportunity as people retire and other people come in, you look at the right caliber of people that replace those who are retiring. So these are all things that you do to ensure that. And you need the old and you need the young. I've always said it's that the old has the experience, the understanding, it's just like a football team. Um, you will still have the new Chelsea team, but you will still have the Williams and those things still in the team, because no matter what happens, you need a William and you need Abrahams.
I see. You're not talking about the Arsenal, but Chelsea. That just by the way. But some would also argue that in this change management process as well, how do you ensure that you have the right set of skill in place to help drive this agenda? Because there are some also say that maybe it's not a human thing. We have too many hands in here, and some are saying that people are questioned about certain people coming in, they don't know how they got in and all the rest. How are all those things being managed? Because it's a perception out there that too much human hands are being pushed in, and maybe that is not what you need right now.
Well, one of the things we have talked to ourselves about is that this year, we want to make sure that every professional staff in this organization has a laptop. And we want to make sure that they don't just have a laptop, they know what to do and to do it effectively with the laptop. Today we have signed an agreement with the support of the government of Germany to construct what we will call our IT training center. And it is with funding, both in terms of grants and part grants and then part long-term soft facility, that we are going to construct what we will call our IT training center, and to be one of the modern technology is a €5 million project, where we will be able to ensure that we train all our people as much as possible, and we ensure that we have the best IT as far as GRA is concerned. So we are looking at the IT sector, and we'll be offering the training to everybody who is available to be able to use it. Again, we're also looking at training the people in terms of not just IT. Tax is a lot of laws. Tax is a completely different subject people need to learn. People must have the accounting background. So all these are areas that we are developing the resource in.
If you just joined us, this is the business edition of PM Express, and then we are engaged in the Acting Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Mr. Misha Dawusu, and all about things about revenue mobilization, dealing with the revenue mobilization challenge, and how do we get around it? Is it a personal problem? Is it getting the right tools? Or what about the concern that when it comes to tax to GDP ratio, despite all the reformations that have been put in place there, we're still having some challenge. And as the authority, that business-friendly, people have criticized them when they go out on their distress action. We're getting all these things from the Acting Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority. This is the business edition of PM Express. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back from the commercial break, and this is the business edition of PM Express. And we are talking about revenue. As a country, it's been seen as one of our biggest challenges, and the institution that is responsible for this is the Ghana Revenue Authority. And the person who's driving this is a commissioner, Mr. Dawusu. And how is it doing? How are the targets doing? How are the numbers doing? And also, is the authority business friendly? Welcome back from the commercial break, and we're talking about targets and how you're achieving these targets and all the rest. I mean, help me out. How's the situation right now in terms of the 2019 target? And we understand you've already achieved it, but you're still fine-tuning the numbers. What is the situation as we speak right now in terms of your targets, meeting them for 2019?
Yeah, I think in 2019, towards the end of the year, the targets were revised to 42 billion, and we ended the year with 43.5 billion, which is about 1.5 billion above the final target that we had. As far as domestic tax is concerned, the target was 30 billion, and we ended up at 31.5 billion. So the domestic tax exceeded the target significantly. For customs, we ended at 12 billion as against 12.54 billion. So there was a shortfall. And I think that for customs, we had mentioned that there had been some the challenges as far as the introduction of the benchmark values are concerned. But as I always say, the benchmark value is a holistic government policy, and it has its own advantages in various sectors. So if we are talking about revenue, it is not just that we should look at in terms of whether it is, but we have to look at the policy as a policy that has its other benefits to the society at large. So we will say that some of the initiatives that we did in the last quarter of the year actually yielded a lot of results. Some of these initiatives included ensuring that among the staff, people were looking at their performance, and we were actually measuring them by their performance. We're actually doing a league table of all the offices and making sure that every office that is performing were acknowledged, and offices that were struggling were also challenged to be able to move up. And therefore, there was a lot of excitement among the staff to be able to drive and to perform. And we think that we saw the results. Again, we also tried to do a bit of compliance, ensuring that people, because we combine both the voluntary compliance as well as the enforcement, which you alluded to, that sometimes people raise concern, but we'll talk about that. Again, we also had to look at the various leakages that we have and try to see how do we block the leakages, and therefore that also helped a lot in terms of increasing the revenue. So we have seen the momentum pick up in the last quarter, and we want to keep this momentum going as far as 2020 is concerned. We are not going to rest on our house.
There's always this theory, and I don't know how practical it is in comparing it to the benchmark value situation, that when the tax rates are low, it has a tendency of improving compliance. What is the situation on the ground where the rates were quite favorable? Was there a corresponding payment and honoring of obligations by the various businesses and individuals out there? Or when the rates are high, you struggle sometimes in compelling these institutions and organizations to honor their tax obligations?
I think both sides are, of the coin do work. It's basically similar to what we have in economics when we talk about the elasticity. So for each particular tax type, you have got to look at the elasticity. So there are some tax types that if you reduce it, you get more people paying, and therefore you expect that what you are saying will be true. But there are some certain tax types, if you reduce it, compliance will still not increase, and therefore your total effect will be a reduction in the overall tax. So it all depends on the particular tax type, and therefore in any time when as policymakers and as well as people who advise for policy making, we are looking at any tax type, we have to look at the possible implications of any move, and before you finally come out with the increase or the decrease. And then over time also we monitor the implications of any new policy, and then we give feedback so that you will see. I think like this year you saw some sort of changes in some of the policies along the line.
So in the situation of the benchmark value, I mean, that actually dipped taxes a little bit, right?
Yeah, and then I will also say that it's not only that. Generally, we also saw a general decline in imports. And I'm talking about the CI value generally. And so that's also another area. So if you have a situation where the benchmark value itself is indicating that you have lower values, and then two, the fact that imports is also going down, then it means that overall the total impact will be a downward trend. But I would say that we had to do immediate measures to ensure that the domestic tax could cover up for the shortfalls because if you look at it, I mentioned to you that we are about 500 short on customs, but we are about 1.5 above on the domestic. And so if you look at even year-to-year increase, domestic did about over 26% year-to-year increase, whereas customs actually did a year-to-year decline because of the benchmark. So whilst we have this policy that has its other positive effect in other areas of the economy, we try to also make sure that we get other things to counter the revenue.
Is the port your biggest headache as a commissioner? We hear a lot of things coming out from there. In terms of tax mobilization, there are a lot of people who complain about loopholes and blocking the loopholes and all the rest. Is that your biggest, in terms of the various tax types and even avenues of collections and all the rest, is it your biggest headache?
I wouldn't say that that's my biggest. I think that there are various areas you have to deal with as far as leading the revenue authority of a country is concerned. The port definitely is one of the areas you have got to deal with. But you know that increasingly many countries, people are not putting so much emphasis on import duties as a greater source of revenue. If you take China, for example, VAT is constituted about 37% of their revenue. And if you come to Ghana, VAT takes less than 10% of our revenue. And if we have an effective VAT system, for example, it will ensure that the people in the informal sector, the people who are not selling across Makula, across the streets in various communities that we believe where all the shops are coming up left and right, all these people will be paying, and then they will be paying immediately. So if these things are working, there are also another area that gives me, if you call it headache, but
or sleepless night, let me use the
things
correction.
to think about. Because if you give you a very good example that if somebody is doing value-added tax, and in another country where you do value-added tax, the tax is deducted and it's immediately credited to the tax authority. So the deduction is a source. If you come here, you write the invoice, you give the invoice to the person, you collect the money, and then later on you have to down account for it. Withholding tax, people deduct the tax, and then it takes them another 1 month. And even there are circumstances that some might even come and then you find out the guy has not paid. And he says, I owe you, and I want 12 months to pay. And then you are wondering, this is the tax that you have deducted from you and I. So what is the reason why the person should not pay the tax and wants another 6 months or 12 months to pay? So I think that there are various areas that we, as a tax authority, we are eager to address. And it's not only the ports, it covers various areas.
Let me ask you another thing that I would ask you that gives you some sleepless nights is all sort of individuals within the society and the so-called big men putting a lot of requests for exemptions and all kinds of letters dropping at your table. Is that also another thing that gives you a lot of, even though we know that the Ghana Revenue Authority is a very independent authority, does it also worry you when you have all sort of requests from all sort of quarters, granting them exemptions and all sort of things?
I think that for me, as a lead the tax authority, my principle is basically let's follow what the law says, and let's all do the right thing. And therefore, if there is any request on my table, if it doesn't fall within the law, it will not fly. And I must say, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. We have to have an honest
even from your bosses, some would say.
But as I'm saying, it must go with the laws. For example, assumptions. Assumptions have their process, and it must go through the proper process and get the approval. And once it gets the approval, we'll work on it as fast as we can to make sure that, because they are also part of the element that helps our country grow. But in terms of the volumes, constantly we need to really look at it. And I know that last year, Parliament was considering the exemptions bill.
Yeah.
I know that they will be looking at it in future. But what I want to say is that as much as possible, we make sure that we follow the rules of the game. And I think that anybody I've encountered with, I try to emphasize that it's important that we follow the rules
Do you
of the game.
see it as a double-edged sword? Because the IMF itself has complained about how much you loosen from this. Some are also saying that, listen, it's also a pull factor in bringing in capital to the country. For you, what's your position on these tax exemptions in trying to help improve capital attraction and also helping to improve revenue collection? Some are saying that let's do away with it. $3 billion, $4 billion in exemptions. Are they bringing in the required capital to the country if we push this agenda?
Again, as I told you, a lot of policies have their own benefits and disadvantages. The important thing is for us to look at what is the optimum level of exemption that is good for our country. Definitely, too much exemptions are also not the best for us as a country. So what is important is for us to look at the optimum level, what will propel and generate the necessary industrialization and growth. At the same time, what will ensure that we get the necessary revenue. I give you an example. If you take the what we call the excise tax stamp that we introduce, and the fact that most of the manufacturers of these products will have to look at and ensure that they affix the stamp and we collect the revenues. But at the same time, we also have the policy that allows for the manufacturers to look at their local content. And therefore, if you are able to increase your local content, then the percentage of the excise stamp tax that you have to pay reduces. So the argument is for this to be able to encourage local content so that a brewery company can ensure that they have more local cassava or local maize and things like that instead of importing them. And therefore, if he does that, then the excise tax rate reduces on the condition that he has local content. That local content gives my father, your father, or anybody in the village or anybody who is doing farming the needed. So the point is trying to get the right balance and ensure that revenue does not suffer.
So, Mr. What do you tell those who might argue that maybe your target doesn't match development in the economy, and that is why you often will achieve your target, but when we look at the overall tax GDP ratio, we are still low? Do you think that you are setting realistic targets for your authority?
I think there is a lot of avenues and room for more growth as far as our taxes revenues are concerned. And therefore, I would not say that the targets are too low, but it's important that we keep to stretch ourselves and identify the gaps and be able to improve upon it. I gave you an example that today, if you look at our tax number, if you take the medium tax and the small taxpayers, if you put them together, excluding the individuals and the PAYE, you get about 88,000 people. I mean, registered taxpayers. Do you understand me? And then if you go to the large taxpayers, you get about 600. So if you put all this together, you find out that the number of people that are actually paying the tax are relatively small. And therefore, there's a need for us to, we have been talking about earlier on, see how we can get more people into the tax bracket. Again, there are avenues for PAYE. You find people that pay Social Security but don't pay PAYE. And so what we are doing today is trying to match our data to the Social Security data. And therefore, that's why I talked about the data matching. So there are a lot of avenues that we can use to enhance the e-commerce. We haven't touched that at all. There's opportunity for us to start looking at how do we tax the e-commerce. Today, many of us are doing Airbnb, we are doing Uber, we are doing Netflix, and it's...
So you'll be going to that space as well?
Yes, we'll be looking at that space.
People think that you are not business friendly. The same businesses that could be described as your golden eggs, when they are having challenges with the operations, distress action, you seal them off, military guys, cameras and all the rest. People have questioned that process that, listen, you are killing these same birds that are laying the golden eggs for you.
On the contrary, I want to say that we are very business friendly. And I'm sure that you have seen me as the head of a tax authority visiting some taxpayers just to interact, to understand their business. I'm coming from the banking background, and for me, I see taxpayers as my customers. And therefore, I want to understand their business. I want to understand what makes them grow, what is affecting them, so that we can interact and grow their business. Because at the end of the day, if their business grows, taxes also grows. So we are very friendly. That's why we do a lot of tax education. We do a lot of interaction with customers or taxpayers. We encourage talking to them. Before you see us doing any distress action, a lot has gone on between us and the taxpayer. And I want to emphasize that. Before you see us doing that, we will have had several meetings with the taxpayer. We will have given him the chance for even re-looking at the debts. In fact, the law allows us to even look at giving you time to pay the debt if you have a genuine situation. But there are certain times people don't even have genuine situation where somebody has purchased, let's say, for example, oil, and he has sold the oil, and we have deducted the taxes, and you and I, in buying the fuel, have paid the tax. And then when he finished selling, he wants time. The law says that you have 21 days plus 4 to go and sell the fuel and come and pay. When he finishes, he wants time to pay you see. So such things are not things that we have to condone, but we need to see how we can make sure that we get the taxes. So coming back to the point I was making, so when we go through all this and the taxpayer is still not paying, and then we have to now inform the taxpayer that where we have reached, we have to now look at the options available to us. And then we have to maybe go to look at his bank account and freeze the bank account. So we do freezing of bank account, and we don't even come to the public. Nobody knows that this person's bank account has been frozen. And so before we will come to say we are doing seal-offs, a lot will have happened. It's often
the last result.
It's a very, very last, and it's not something that we wish to do. But again, if the taxpayer, after all the effort, is not responding, then we don't have an option but to...
What is the authority also doing about, I mean, there are news about abusing the process of this whole car auction business and all the rest. From the authority's perspective, what are you doing about it?
I think that this is another, it's a topic for another time of conversation. But generally, we, as an authority, we are looking at this whole auction and trying to look at what is the best way of handling the auctions. One of the things that we will be introducing before the end of the year is looking at an e-auction, where there will be a system where you can log in and be able to see the things that are available and gazetted for auction and be able to select, and therefore be able to do it online. And therefore, that we believe that this will ensure that there's a bit of transparency in the system. But generally, we also have to look at these guidelines today and see how can we improve upon the guidelines as far as what is the reserve price for a particular commodity. And again, we also have to look at those people who are also winning the auctions as to how quick they have to evacuate their goods and things like that. So it's something that we will be looking at as a whole.
And these interventions will deal with the human element as well to make sure that it's kind of corruption-free and the state get the right to get the right revenue and taxes from it.
Yeah, you mentioned in your earlier conversation that we seem to rely on a lot of technology. Technology also helps us to be able to eliminate the human weaknesses that comes in, and the leakages. So we believe that a lot of these things will help eliminate some of the weaknesses that might come in the system. In addition, I haven't mentioned it, but I want to emphasize that one of the things that is that is also to ensure that integrity engineering is improved. I will have to ensure that every member of our staff complies with the Constitution as far as your asset declaration is concerned. And every member, be above the level that is described, will have to do.
Are there any targets? When are we doing this? Or it started already?
I've already written to every member of staff and given them a deadline of the end of February to make sure that they have obtained the appropriate documents from the Auditor General, and then have made steps to make sure that they file their. And not only that, we'll be doing a lot on that level. We'll be publishing in the papers telephone numbers and contact numbers, such that if any taxpayer or the public thinks that he's being intimidated or not being treated fairly, or he's not getting the right response from this auditor, you have numbers that he can call, and you will get people to respond to it. We are going to have who audits the auditor. So we are going to have a team that will ensure that if once you have done an audit, they will regularly sample the audits that have been done by the regular staff and re-audit them, so that if you do your audits, you don't know whether your audit that you've done will be sampled and audited again. And so that you become aware that you could be audited as an auditor.
I see.
So these are initiatives that we are going to implement, and we're making sure that we build on integrity.
Let me say that your final thoughts in a minute to Ghanaians out there who are still looking up to the authority to ensure that we help raise the required revenue for the state.
I think that 2020 we are looking at is an election year. There are a lot of expenditure that happens both for the election itself and for other activity. And the target for the government is over 747 billion. We are stretching ourselves, aiming that we should be able to go beyond the 47 billion, looking at around over 50 billion or anything like that. And therefore, we want to encourage that we are a friendly organization. We encourage voluntary compliance, and we want to encourage all Ghanaians that tax is an obligation. And as many of us are Christians or religious, people, and if we are paying our tithes and all those things, it's important that we also see our obligation to pay our taxes. And I think that if we pay our taxes effectively, our young brothers and sisters will get to the schools to attend, the roads in our villages will get better. Some of the struggles that we have in terms of the infrastructure will improve. And therefore, we should see it as our obligation and not be compelled to be able to pay our taxes. We also encourage Ghanaians, if you don't have a tin, I encourage you to get one. If you don't have the tax stamp up on your Android phone, I encourage you, even George, to make sure that you have the tax stamp authenticator app, so that if you buy any drink or anything, you can easily authenticate whether it's a genuine one or not. And last but not the least, we also want to encourage that we are actually coming up with a new informant award policy. We are waiting for the completion of the government's laws as far as the reward for what do you call it?
Informant.
Informants is concerned. But whilst it's coming up and it's being worked out, we are coming out with our own guideline. And we are bringing up very, very, if I will be publishing the papers very soon, very, very attractive rewards. Attractive rewards that people can get up to 250,000.
Whistleblowers.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So why the Whistleblower Act is being finalized. You know, there's human rights already there, but
Okay.
the execution and the implementation has not completely been done. And therefore, people are not being able to get their benefit from the Whistleblower Act. So whilst that is pending, we want to come out of our own, and that's why we don't want to call it the Whistleblower, because we don't want to conflict with
the state.
So, but later on, when the Whistleblower Act is operational, we'll go by it. But in the meantime, we'll come out with an informant award policy. And we have already come out with the policy. The board has approved, and it will come out. And I'm saying that the rewards are very attractive. And therefore, I want to encourage that if you know anybody that you think that you need to do whistleblowing,
maybe I'll be the first one. Well, also we have to draw the curtain down on our engagement with the Acting Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Mr. Mishadayo Wusuamu. I know that we've got some education. I have been educated, but some would say that it still goes on in trying to deal with the revenue challenge. We hope that some of these policy measures he's put out will help address those challenges. My name is George Afe, but I know that debate will still go on in your homes and your offices. This has been the business edition of PM Express.